kid from the bush who grew into a legend in his own lunchtime, former SAS soldier Michael J. Malone has seen it all. This is Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, hosted by the man himself, Mick Malone, along with Toby Malone, as they examine this long, storied career in the Australian Special Forces. Join us each week for behind-the-scenes insight, exclusive readings, and brutally honest truths from a true original. Welcome to Never Die Wondering. Welcome to episode 35 of Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, a podcast that explores the life and legend of Michael John Malone, OAM. My name is Toby Malone, Mick's son and co-host of this podcast series, joined by the man whose name is in the title, Mick Malone. G'day, Dad.
G'day, Tobes. Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you. So the last episode, we saw a big shift. Everything changed for you, and to commemorate the moment, my mum, Jo Malone, was here for the recording. How did it feel to have her along for the ride?
Oh, she's a gem, mate. Absolutely.
She is.
You
Yeah,
know,
she's got your number. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it was nice to have Mum along. I thought it might be nice to have have her in just to give her perspective. Um, and maybe we'll do another one of those at some point. But yeah, today we're going to be talking a little bit more about what happened next. So you met Mum, you went away and went out into the bush, but now it's time to settle down, or to at least get to the point where. So when you met her, so how quickly did you know you were going to marry her?
Second week.
Right. What was it
No, no,
about? What was it about her that just?
no. I was pretty keen about her. She was calm. She was fun, attractive, and a Cotslow girl.
Right.
What else
And
could you want?
and the old story you used to tell, which didn't get into the book. There's a bunch of these that didn't get into the book, and this could be another furphy. But you said to me once that you never laid a finger on her for the first few times you went out with her, and so she thought you were gay
Yeah, she thought I was a bit suspect.
because you wouldn't lay a finger on her. Because would you think that was because you were shy? Could like,
Oh,
or do you think
absolutely. My
what?
shyness. I was shy of the hell, mate.
So it didn't have anything to do with you playing some long game or or,
No,
or
no, no. I
being
had
too suave.
no ulterior motives at all.
Right. So yeah. So yeah, that's one of those legendary stories that you used to always put around. And then I realized in the last episode that didn't make it into the book. There's a lot of things that didn't make it into the book, but usually it was because you forgot to put it in, and then you just said no when I told you to add more
You
stuff.
can't remember everything, mate.
That's true. That's what the podcast is for. So that's good. This will fill out your Wikipedia page, and there is a Wikipedia page. We have a Wikipedia page for Mick Malone.
Yeah.
There is.
Oh,
There's a Wikipedia page that outlines your life and legend. So it's you're all over the place.
oh my God.
But you wouldn't be half of where you are if it wasn't for your wife
Yeah,
keeping you in line. So.
no, you're right. She was absolutely the catalyst for
Yeah.
me in the straight and narrow.
Well, you used to talk a lot about how different blokes with less dependable wives were not nearly as steady in the regiment. That like,
Oh, yeah. Any number of them, mate. Any number.
yeah, not to say that the people whose marriages didn't survive were doing anything different, anything wrong. It was more just that you lucked out and got someone who kept you steady, as opposed to someone who had problems with you being away or whatever it was.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
so anyway, let's get into this reading.
There was a time where she made a decision that the only way she's going to survive in the role of an army wife was to lead her own life and
Hmm.
have a career. And as we do today, she goes to everything, I go to nothing.
Right.
But and we don't argue about that. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, she tells a story about how you went out to the bush for a month or something, and then you came back and said, "All right, we going out tonight?" And she said, "No, I'm busy."
I've got something else to do. I've already got plans.
Yeah,
And that being sort of a really nice sort of balance that you've got. And so it's nice to be able to know you've got that.
I love it dearly, mate.
Yes, absolutely. We can't, you two are a pair. We can't imagine you one without the other. So anyway, let's get into the reading because we're going to be talking about um, when you finally got married. So today we'll be reading chapter 32 of Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone OAM, published in 2024 by Imprimatur Books Perth. This chapter, entitled Married Life, covers pages 225 to 234 in the print edition. The ebook may have slightly different numbering, so follow from the beginning of the chapter. As we read, the body of the text will be read by author Mick Malone. Whenever we come across a footnote, we'll pause in the least disruptive way possible, and I will read the footnotes. And now, without further ado, Two Ranks on the Road.
Chapter 32, Married Life, 74 to 75. I pulled my head in. In 1974, I'd moved from the barracks to an old house named Sandy Ridge, a few doors up the hill from the ABH in Cottesloe. I shared it with old mate Adrian Blacker, who had recently returned from the front. He was a Queenslander from Blackwall, out in the back blocks, and did two tours with 2 Squadron. I met him when he returned after the second. He was a bundle of laughs, and we gravitated to the Cottesloe Rugby League and Union clubs. We had many a party in the old house, and he did much of the cooking. It was great fun while it lasted, until he nearly burnt the house down by going to sleep with a cigarette in his mouth. A salutary lesson for old mate Adrian. Next day, he was sitting on the lounge smoking when Joe walked in and said, "You're not still smoking, are you?" He promptly stubbed it out and never smoked again in his life. October 74, I took my girl to the Perth Royal Show, where I casually proposed to her. "Yes," she said. One of the biggest shocks of my life. I had no ring, so I went to a novelty stall and bought a large plastic ring for $2, and that was and is our engagement ring to this day. I did manage to purchase a more traditional ring, which I paid for off in instalments and presented it to her in the bottom of a bag of mixed lollies. It was difficult to plan a wedding and serve in SASR. I went to her mother, Dawn, and went down on one knee and asked for her daughter's hand in marriage. She was delighted and threw her arms around me. Joe wanted to elope immediately, but my saner head prevailed. Prevailed because we had mothers, a father, a grandmothers, great aunts, brothers, and sisters to consider. Being a Catholic, after a fashion, I thought a church wedding was the thing to do, but I met stiff opposition from Jo on this. Although she was MLC educated, she had no intention of getting married in a church. So it was a registry office in April 1975. There was a hell of a lot of planning to be done up to this time. I had to buy a new suit and shoes, and Jo had to find her perfect outfit. My family flew in a few days before the wedding and booked into a hotel in town. Mum and Dad came along with sister Helen and two of her 3 kids, Louise and Peter. Some of her mates were there as well. Some of my mates were there as well. I chose Paul Callahan as my best man, witness. We served together in 3 Squadron in Vietnam, and he was a good mate. Don Blue, Joe's brother, was her witness at the registry office in lieu of her long deceased father. Being a staunch Catholic, my father wasn't at all happy to be there at the registry office. He had a look on his face like a goat chewing a quince, but he was under strict instructions from my mother, so he behaved himself. The reception was back at Dawn's house in Lion Street, in the poor end of Cottesloe. We had a keg of beer, champagne, and orange juice, canapes, sandwiches, and much jollity in the backyard. Joe's grandmother, Ivy Mears, made the cake. The problem was the guests of honour, Joe and I, were late. We caught a cab from the city to the Highway Hotel for a celebratory drink, and then to top of North Street, Swanbourne, and walked to Lion Street, a bit of a haul. Needless to say, a lot of a lot of our guests were three sheets to the wind by the time we arrived, and weren't they what? And the social photographer from the Women's Weekly was about to head home. My father and Adrian, in particular, had the round bottom shoes on. Adrian, of course, sang a rendition of Danny Boy, his signature song, which brought the house down. He had such a mellifluous voice, which always got to work out with a few cold ones in. Once we were there, the speeches began. Don spoke well, as did Paul Callaghan. The oldies were getting stuck into the champers and orange, having a lovely time. By the time it came for us to leave, everyone was happy and well on the way to being drunk. Dad and Adrian had tied various things to Joe's little brown Datsun and tried to lift the back off the ground. Silly buggers. We finally escaped and headed for our honeymoon's bolt hole, the Sheraton Hotel in the city. I was at last alone with my newly minted gorgeous wife and looked forward to champers and dinner in bed, along with plenty of others, plenty of the other. We had very little money, so we couldn't be extravagant. Sandwiches by room service was about as good as it got. We slept the sleep of the dead in this enormous circular bed and lay in the morning. By the time we got our shit together, it was midday, but having nothing on the agenda, we casually showered, got dressed, and walked up to town. And wouldn't you know it, it was when I ran smack bang into an old girlfriend of mine who used to work in the SASR library. A few quick blushes from me, a swift intro to Joe, and we beat a heasy retreat. Whew.
Footnote, she was a great chick, but ran out of patience with me and showed me the door.
There were no awkward questions in Hay Street that day, all very calm and friendly. We lived off takeaways for the weekend, as money was desperately short. When we left the Sheraton, we had about $20 between us. Luckily, the car was parked in a hotel car park and was part of the room deal. We'd organised a flat down in Warnham Road, Cottesloe, as our domicile, and our bed was being delivered that day. Our bed was the most important item, obviously, along with dining room chairs and table. Not sure whether we even had a TV at this stage. We started our new house tradition, there on the floor of the Warnham flat. No, not that. We had fish and chips. I had a day and night there with Joe before I had to report back to the barracks. We were off on a major exercise up north, and so left Joe for the first of many times in our married life to get the place fixed up. Back at the barracks, I applied for a married quarter. The orderly room said it would probably be in Balga or Nollamara, to which I said, yeah, nah. Got any closer? When I got back from the bush, I'd hoped my application for had been approved, not in Balga or Nollamara. That night I told Joe I'd applied for a married quarter, and we would just wait and see what unfolds. Joe was working at Myer at the time, so we'd be pretty busy with her work and friends. She knocked around with a bunch of girls she went to school with and was a member of a folk band, the First Circle, with Anne Murray, who played in pubs and smoky cellars in Fremantle and Cottesloe. Joe had a deep, husky voice and could really sing. Being an idiot, I wasn't happy for her for to be out singing. Why don't ask why, it just was.
Footnote, they were booked to perform at the OBH, and the thought of her singing for all my drunken mates was too much.
but gave it away from me, which I wear as a burden to this day. They may very well have been the next Peter, Paul and Mary. Just before we were married, I'd arranged to buy a pedigree black Labrador dog for my new wife. He would be great company for Jo whenever I was away, which was quite often. I bought him off an old scoundrel in Cottesloe and he cost a pretty penny. Dog's name was Hebron Black Ace, or just Ace, and became a very big part of our lives, especially later when we had kids. Once again in the vehicle mounted saddle, having fun with my mates, same old, same old. Drive long drive north to get to the exercise area, and a series of navigation exercises and recce's. We were out in Spinifex country, and the punctures were frequent. We had a few new blokes with us who had to be shown the ropes of driving, gunnery, and astronavigation. Each of the 8 vehicles in the troop were configured slightly differently to the whims of the crew. We took the complete pair of wheels off the front bull bar and made it a cradle alongside the commander and driver. This was eventually taken up by all crews and persisted from there on. I must admit I felt quite different now that I had a lovely wife waiting for me back home. I had to pull my head in and grow up. I was now 28 and Jo was 23, a mere slip of a girl. We had no plans beyond day-to-day life. It was not going to be easy for either of us, but at least she had a mother close by. When I got back, I found out that I'd been offered a AmeriQuarter in Balga. I immediately told them no. We didn't want it.
Footnote, there was no way Cottesloe girl Jo was going to live in Balga.
And would wait for something closer. A couple of weeks later, we were offered a AmeriQuarter in Fremantle in the Gunners Row at 99 Queen Victoria Street. These were solid stone buildings built around the time the artillery barracks was built in 1913. They were separated from the barracks by a lane which provided access to the houses and had been built to provide married quarters to married soldiers posted in the barracks. The old house had 2 bedrooms, a small lounge, separate kitchen and bathroom, toilet up the back with a small backyard and carport. There were around 12 married quarters in the row, similarly configured, and they were pretty run down. We left the chance to live there. Freo was the go-to place. The Int Sergeant, Jock Nicholson, lived next door, and Tiny and Gab Ralph lived up the end. Bill and Sue Bryden had moved in, and Graham Prairie Dog Brammer also made his home there. So it was a real regimental spot. Again, we sat on the floor with fish and chips on the first night. Once we settled in there, we spent some nights setting mouse traps. The hill on which the barracks was built is riddled with mice tunnels. Never saw any rats, thankfully, and we must have caught 5 or 6 every night. Clack, 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 the traps went until we'd got about 20 in the first week, but it was what it was. The old buildings were really showing their age back then, and nowadays have been fully restored. They have a real picture and they look a real picture and hit the market at around 500,000 each. Towards the end of 1975, we saw a gigantic upheaval in federal politics, with PM Gough Whitlam shown the door by the Governor-General, a bloke Whitlam had put in place himself. The outcry reverberated around the land for years. Well may you say say God save the Queen, but nothing will save the Governor-General. A classic off put down, full of opprobrium, vindictiveness and spite. It appears it was ever thus with the Labor Party. Malcolm Fraser was installed as PM, and his one saving grace was that, as a Liberal, he was more favourably disposed towards the military. They went to an election that year. Whitlam and his socialists were put to the sword, losing heavily. In early 76, I attended a survival course, the bulk of which was conducted down in the Shannon River Basin in the Walpole area of southwest WA. We had quite a few scoundrels and vagabonds in the course, all from SASR. We spent a few days in a bush camp where we were taught trapping, skinning and bush foraging. Big Johnny McMaster was the dab hand at skinning rabbits and various other bushman skills, while a lot of us from vehicle mounted already had quite a lot of experience in these areas. We also discussed many ways of getting water from seemingly waterless landscape. At the end of the instructional period, we were placed in four-man teams and dropped off at various places along the Shannon River. This was heavy tea tree country, and so the water was black, but it was, however, very drinkable. We were most thankful for that. We found an old disused railway line and dug out 6 or 8 sleepers and lugged them back to our campsite to use as fortress-style walls of our lean-to. We dug out part of the riverbank on a small sliver of sand and made bed spaces for 4 and got our fire going with a sneaky steel match someone had secreted in his boot. It was pretty cold and we prayed it didn't rain. We spent the first couple of hours at our palatial campsite collecting a huge stack of wood on it for our fire, which we wanted to burn for the entire time we were there. It was a non-tact course, so there was no enemy sneaking around trying to find us. Tactical survival was a vastly different story. We foraged up and down the river and found quite an assortment of edible plants and roots. The best discovery was a bed of freshwater mussels, which we gorged on once they had secreted the sand and other brine from their guts. It took about two days to get them clean enough to eat. We found an old pantyhose up near a bush track and decided this would be an ideal marron or yabby net. One of the blokes had trapped a small water rat, which we had planned to eat as a last resort. But instead, this was dissected and became marron bait. There was a dark pond a little way upstream with a large log crossing it, which was an ideal spot for which to drop our trap. Eddie Gooch became the marron fisherman, and Julie dropped the pantyhose in the water, loaded with stinky pieces of rat attached to a length of string, another smuggled item. We sat round our wonderful fire for quite a while, making sure we had plenty of wood to get us through the night. Everyone had turned in, leaving one man on picket. At around midnight, we were woken by the picket and great flapping around. "Sounds like a large marron in the trap," said Ed as he scarpered down the creek. I followed with a bush torch to the large log where Ed was wrestling with this creature, determined to escape the net. By the torchlight, we could see it was a huge marron and had probably been living in that waterhole for many years, avoiding interfering humans until the tasty piece of water rat was offered. Ed had hold of it behind the head as he gingerly made his way off the log to execute his marron on the riverbank. What a monster. Biggest one of us had ever seen. Biggest one any of us had ever seen. He wouldn't go far amongst 4 starving diggers, but we could use every part of it and suck the bones dry. Back in the camp, we emptied out our beetroot can, Bush Billy, rescuing the gnarled tea bag, which we'd been using for a couple of days, fresh water, and in went the piece of marron, ready for cooking. In the morning, we built up the fire and hit the rack. as it was only 1 a.m. By sparrows, there was movement in the camp. It had started to rain, and we were concerned that our camp would be flooded out. Not to worry, the rain stopped and the sun shone. And it looked like it was going to be a fine day. We got the marron pot into the fire and watched it until it boiled, supplemented with a dozen or so fresh mussels. It was going to make a good seafood soup. Our only drama was no salt, but it was what it was. We made the soup last for 2 days, very disciplined. The rest of our food came from foraging along the river. We ate the pith of zamia palms, flowers that were still blooming, fungi around the carry trees, keeping a weather eye open for the poisonous ones. Wattle seeds were sought after, and it would have been nice to find billy goat plums, the northwest only, or bush pepper, Tasmania, wild beehives, native yams, or grass trees, flowering spikes soaked in fresh water to collect nectar, but it wasn't to be.
Footnote: at this time, we wish we had a Noongar, Bibbulmun country man with us, who may be able to identify the edible plants. Gordon Tiddums was in another group, and beside he was of Wongai or Yamachi extraction, so he might have been little use down in these parts. With us, it was a real stab in the dark.
Anyway, it was a good way to lose weight. At the end of the seventh day, we packed up our meagre possessions and headed for the RV, the pickup point. We took our billy can filled with mussels, river mussels, which were full of grit. My plan was to get them home, let them disgorge their grit, and we could have a nice feed in a few days' time. I put them in the shed at my marricord and promptly forgot about them. When I eventually checked them out, they were all dead and stinking, the stupid mistake of a city dweller. In that year, Joe and I bought a combi camper with a view that the three of us, Joe, the dog, and me, would go touring around the state. At Christmas, we packed up and drove across to Nullarbor to spend Christmas with my folks. Mum was thrilled to see us. She had by this time come up in the world. She had her own TAB agency at Avalon on the northern beaches. We caught up with my sister Helen, her husband Mick, and their beautiful kids. It was a great holiday in a reliable car. On the way back across the Nullarbor, we drove through a raging bushfire. Well, Joe drove through it as I was asleep in the back with the dog. I remember being jolted awake and was aware of a fire on both sides of the vehicle as she put her foot down, and we escaped the inferno. What a girl. After we got through, they closed the road. End of chapter.
And that was chapter 32 from Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, as read by the author. All right. So, married life, never a dull moment.
No?
All sorts of things going on in that chapter. And yeah, you got the wedding day. In the last episode, we talked about the famous photo of you both standing on the steps of the registry office with the "My Love Kept Me Alive" TV week banner. And so technically that photo belongs to this chapter. So I wanted to bring it up again there. And this suit of yours is something else. And just this cream-colored suit with
It was light blue.
Oh, was it light blue? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Of course it was light blue. That's right.
And the
Light,
blue and white shoes.
and then the blue and white shoes with the two-tone shoes, but you can't see the shoes because they're covered by bell bottoms.
Yeah, and the tie was used later as a tablecloth.
Yeah, big wide plaid tie and blue shirt. Was it
Blue
blue?
shirt.
Blue shirt. Yeah. But mum's wedding dress, because she could still put it on today. She has it in the shed, I think. It's still got it out there.
He's got it here still.
Yeah. So lovely. So but looking very happy and very prosperous. And a few more photos. There's another close-up picture here of the two of you And again, if you're listening to the podcast and not seeing the visuals, you check us out on YouTube. It's just to give that. And then there's some the two of you cutting the cake that was made by Ivy Mears, my great grandmother, who was it was great. Must have been great to have all of the two sides of the families all together in one spot, and with
Oh,
the reception in my grandmother's backyard.
yeah, it was fantastic. All my mates were there. A few crazies.
And that and
Full
then the old
of-
and then
sorry.
the old story that you guys showed up late to your own wedding reception.
It was her fault. She wanted to have a drink at the highway.
And then from there, you just like wandering up. Yeah, up. Do you think of that when you drive up North Street now?
Absolutely, every time.
Yeah, walking up there, and that's not a short walk.
No.
And it's interesting because by the time this comes out, this will be old news. But you're in the middle of moving, and you're moving out of Perth back down to Swanbourne, and so you're going to be moving to right at the top of North Street. So the new place that you're staying in is going to be a stone's throw from where the taxi dropped you off at the top of North Street.
Yeah,
So that's it feels kind of
it's going to be very nostalgic, mate.
cyclical. Yeah, that's it. So nice to be back in Swanee and to be able to relive those moments. So a great um, uh, wedding and then able to get back into the action at the regiment, doing the vehicle mounted work. Um, and we spent a lot of time in this chapter talking about the survival course, which is one of those fairly important moments um, in the SAS, these survival
Yeah.
courses. So tell us about the origins of these survival courses and what goes into what's expected on those.
Well, they just wanted blokes to show individual resilience, and if you had to, you could survive on your own, no matter where you were. So you had to have a few tricks up your sleeve about what to eat and where to find water. Um, the blackfellas in our country are the geniuses when it comes to the bush.
Hmm.
They know where the water is. They know where the animals are. They know what you can eat and what you can't eat. It's quite amazing, and we
Hmm.
know nothing compared to them. So it's a matter of sort of delving into their culture.
Was there
Um,
ever any kind of instruction on that? How you were given instruction on
oh,
conversational Vietnamese and
we had white blokes telling us how things are supposed to work, but no, they didn't bring. Gordon Tiddums was there, of course, and old Gordon used to be called on to have a bit of a yarn about a few things.
hmm.
Um, Lovely bloke, Gordon.
Yeah. But
No, we
s- so when you were dropped in the survival course, did you have any supplies with you at all, or were you in there with nothing?
we were in the camp for a week, learning all sorts of things, skinning animals, and all that sort of stuff. And then they dumped us out in the bush in groups of four, and with nothing
Hmm.
except what we smuggled. Of course, there was a bit of smuggling going on.
Right. Which,
The steel match was the best thing,
yeah.
which someone secreted somewhere in their boot. But they'd run the pencil over you pretty closely to make sure you weren't taking um, Shadow Briand for two in a backpack or something.
Yeah. Right. Did anyone crack up on a survival course?
No, not really.
Everyone managed it okay?
Most blokes handled it pretty well. If you got a bit uptight, you just sat down and just contemplated your navel.
But it was
Big,
obviously a completely obviously a
sorry.
completely different experience to being on patrol in Vietnam.
Oh, well, once you take the enemy out of the survival course. It's a doddle, really. But once you've got an active enemy out there, you can't do the same things. You can't have a fire. Um, you can't go near roads or tracks. Um, you have to be quiet. All those things when you've got an enemy, but when you've got no enemy, it's a
Mm,
holiday camp.
right. Did your water discipline get any better when you're out at this stage?
Oh, we lived on a creek, so
So that wasn't an issue.
no, no. My water discipline, oh God. Kirk has taught me all that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's and then the story of the Marin. How big was the Marin? Does it get big? Gets bigger every time you tell the
Mighty Shore
story.
was about that long.
Like a lobster. Almost.
Big lobster, black,
Wow. And
Marin.
he's probably decades old.
Oh, he'd been there for 40 years, I reckon.
Yeah.
Big old bloke, and he went in the pot.
Right.
The soup was really good, though. I can still taste it today. I just wish we had a bit of salt.
Yeah. And there's a few other photos of the survival course that happens here. We can see some pictures of the camp is set up and various characters, Ed Gooch, Bob Sindel, um, and there's Kaz.
Lettuce, little Casmeric.
Yeah. And then Shannon River Bush Camp. And so obviously you're setting up again. I'm showing this on the screen where most people are listening with no video, but yeah. So you're setting up a little shelter here, but is the idea to be camouflaged as well as safe or as
No, not really. He just wanted to see if he could make it waterproof, watertight. If it
right,
rained, we were going to either get washed out or have to pack our bongos and move up the hill a bit.
right,
But it didn't rain enough, so we didn't get wet or anything, so we were pretty happy.
right?
Uh,
Yeah. No, it's I mean, I guess compared to, yeah, like you said, compared to being on patrols in Vietnam, this was nothing.
yeah,
Was there any?
once you add enemy to any of those situations, it
Hmm.
goes from contact to attack, and uh, you got to be armed for bear.
Yeah, yeah. Is it so without a water fight, what were you preparing for with this kind of
Well, it's just
survival course?
like anything. You were soldiering, and you just did all the things that you need to do to be a good soldier.
Right,
And you had to be ready in case the government sort of committed you to some new stash somewhere.
right. Hmm.
Um, the boys in Afghanistan that never got a chance to do anything at home. Uh, they were deployed in 4 month stints in Afghanistan. They'd be home for 4 months and then they'd be back again to Afghanistan. Some blokes done 7 or 8 tours. It's
Yeah.
quite unbelievable when you
Hmm.
think about it.
Yeah.
We were so washed out after one
Hmm.
that it took 2 years to basically recover and get ready for the next one.
Hmm.
But anyway, it is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. And then
Maybe maybe the young blokes these days are tougher than we were.
maybe. Yeah, and then the last speaking of tough, the last section of the book shows the famous combi van there. There's a photo
Yeah.
there on the last page of Ace, the dog, who was your first child. So this is where he's first introduced into the book. It's a black Labrador. You said you bought him off a scoundrel. Who was the scoundrel you bought him off?
Uh, he was some buffhead down in Cottesloe who came from Sydney. He was a Sydney smarty,
Right.
big bloke with a wife. And they lived on Grant Street.
And did they have a dog that had puppies, or did they have?
They bred Labradors
Right.
and sold them for hundreds. I'm
Right.
not sure what we paid, but it wasn't cheap.
Right.
But it was the best thing I ever did. Second best, third best, fourth best.
Yeah, he was a good dog. He was a good
Ah,
dog. Yeah.
you remember him.
Of course. Of course.
When you were one or less, you crawl all over him and
Yeah.
lift up his mouth and look at his teeth and poke him in the eye, and he'd never bat an eyelid.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Good dog. Yeah, so well, that's great. Lots of stuff happening in this chapter, and life is only getting more and more interesting for you at this point. So we've got more ahead. But that is all the time we have this week for Never Die Wondering. Never join us next week for the next installment in our exploration of Mick Malone's career as we get to the 33rd chapter of the book itself, titled Burma and Malaysia. If you have a copy of Two Ranks, read along with us. I've been Toby Malone, and thank you to Mick Malone for passionately joining me on this journey.
See you, mate.
Cheers.
Catch you next time.
Yeah.
This has been Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words. For links to purchase your own copies of Mick's books, visit the show notes or mickmalone.com.au. This podcast is produced by Toby Malone, Jo Malone and Mick Malone, and engineered by Toby Malone. Theme music is The Happy Wanderer, the official SAS march, as reimagined by Cormac Malone and Meg Logue Malone. Yes, this is a family affair. This is a GM production in association with Imprimatur Books.